Let's talk briefly about large quantity generators. Again, after this class, there's a 2-hour class. Mickey Pierce is going to talk for 2 hours, and he can talk for 2 hours rather easily on LQGs. But I just want to introduce the concept. Remember what LQGs are, and it doesn't matter whether you're a non-RCRA only or RCRA whatever. It's if your total amount of hazardous waste generated exceeds 1,000 kilograms a month, you're a large quantity generator. Pump your chest, I'm an LQG. Well, LQGs got more requirements on them than SQGs. And be aware that you may have an LQG and you may not even know it. Usually your Jiffy Lubes, your places that do lots of oil changes, right? Used oil is regulated in the state as a hazardous waste by definition, probably over 1,000 kilograms a month. So those guys are going to be LQGs, so just be aware as an inspector. They have 90 days from the initial start date to where that waste has to be off-site. We talked a little bit about satellite storage. Okay, they're not affected by this requirement until they're transferred to the 90-day storage area. Now, satellite storage was, in my opinion, intended for the big, giant, rambling facilities that are multi-acres where they'll have a designated cage for all of their hazardous waste. That's their 90-day storage area. But we certainly can have smaller facilities that employ satellite accumulation where they don't have a designated 90-day storage area, and that's okay because we consider the entire facility the 90-day storage area. So, just for clarification. I call out empty container labeling under LQGs, but actually this requirement is for any generator that has empty containers. But I put it under LQGs because LQGs are really under the magnifying glass, more so by not only you as a CUPA inspector, but by DTSC, and if they're a RCRA LQG, by Fed EPA. A few years ago, Region 9 came knocking on our door in Orange County and said, hey, we want to come out and inspect some of your metal finishers. Just 2. Oh, okay. And it's just a roulette wheel under which supervisory group they were going to be, right? And I started shaking. And one of the facilities was formally inspected by this young lady, not to put you under the microscope. So Shah Rashidi Fart's here. She was one of my inspectors a long time ago and very, very good. And I was very confident that we were not going to have any issues at these plating shops. And to my amazement, we didn't have any major issues at either one of the plating facilities, which if you know, who all's been in a plating shop? Fun? In a weird kind of way, usually fun. But the big thing that they harped on was training records, and I'm going to talk about those later. But all of the haz waste management, their empty containers were identified properly. I was really, really pleased. But anyways, for empty containers at any facility, there are labels available. There's, I believe the exhibitors there's a labeling company over there that has this whole packet of giveaways, samples of various labels. This used to be one of the most common violations we would write, and we put it in our budget to start purchasing some of these labels. Even though, yes, we're on site, we witness a labeling violation, we can get it corrected really quick. So this has been a big benefit and kind of helps sell yourself, kind of, you know, you have fees that you're putting on the businesses. Why not do some easy customer service at the same time? I believe the regulation is specific, though, that when you have a drum that previously held a hazardous substance that's now empty and you're storing it on site, it has to be marked with the date it was empty. Technically, the words empty are not required, but they make these labels. Makes sense, though, doesn't it? Should be marked empty. And this is required on drums that previously held a hazardous substance. It's not on new drums that a business purchases. They don't have to label those. Yes?
Yes, a problem I see with those labels, just like that one, is they all cite the federal standard at the bottom. Nobody makes one that cites the state standard, correct? So it still has the 1 inch on there.
Right. We didn't get into that too heavily with empty 55-gallon drums. Yeah. These labels, usually these drums are stored outside, right? And these labels don't do well in the climate, especially in Southern California where we have a lot of heat and sunlight. They fade, they get weathered, and they fall off. So I actually have people using paint pens. So, but technically just the date, but oftentimes we have them marked empty with the date. But so they don't need to mark their brand new drums, nor do they need to mark empty drums that had, like food ingredients or something like that that's not a hazardous substance. So just be aware of that. Don't be overzealous with that. But the reason is that the state doesn't want all these empty drums to be stockpiling, so they give them a 1-year limit to do something with it. Either put it back in use or have it go off-site for scrap or a drum reconditioner. Okay, there's a problem with this slide. This is why I had my disclaimer earlier. I didn't have time to change it. I'll just read it, and if you think you know what's wrong with it, raise your hand. Written logs of daily inspections of above-ground portions of the hazardous waste tank system and weekly logs of the hazardous waste container storage area inspections must be maintained at generating facility. Be available upon inspection. No. Anyone else? Okay. There is no regulatory requirement for a written log at any facility, whether you're nodding. Yeah, see? I know. This is in our guide that's on our website. So guess what I get tasked with when I get back to the shop? It's often stated, especially at LQGs, again, with Fed EPA and all that stuff, they wanted to see all this stuff documented. It's highly advisable to my LQG. It makes sense. How do you know that stuff's being inspected, right? Other than what your contact tells you. And if they don't have a log, then I'm quoting them in my inspection report, what they told me. And you'll learn, as a new inspector, you'll learn to ask questions a certain way. So as you're not putting the answer in the question, you would ask, do you inspect your container storage area? Yes. Weekly? No, that's not what you say. How often do you inspect your container storage area? Quarterly. Violation, right? Then you let them know what the requirement is. But the log's kind of, again, if they have the log, it's self-policing. They'll know that they have to do it and what frequency and who it was. So I highly recommend keeping the logs. For tanks, yes, but specifically for the container storage, not required. But so if you're doing the tank system inspection, what's going to be in the log? You're going to have the date, of course, the initials or signature of who the employee was that did the inspection, any comments, any maintenance or repairs that were made, areas of inspection, did they verify any leaks, cracks, corrosion, things like that. And they'll set up their own format. Contingency plan. Businesses must have a formal written hazardous waste contingency plan or a business plan. I'm not getting into that too heavily, obviously. Aisle space, this is a big one, especially at LQGs. It says in regulation that they must have adequate aisle space. What's adequate aisle space? Anyone? What's your concept of adequate aisle space?
I'd say 3 feet.
3 feet. So we actually put 3 feet on an actual measurement. Anyone else? Okay, have to be able to read, or I'll go even further, have the ability to inspect the entire container. Okay, so, yes, sir? Yes, but for inspecting it, you want it to be accessible to inspect. So if I've got 4 drums on a pallet shoved in the corner, how am I going to inspect that farthest drum? You want to be able to see the labeling, yes, but you want to also view is the drum in good condition? Does it have a big giant dent on the side of it? So it's more of a performance-based. There is no number, no length, width number in regulation. It's just adequate aisle space to accommodate unobstructed movement of personnel and fire spill control in an emergency. So there's my picture there. Is that adequate aisle space? I hope that's a no. This was on an earlier slide. Professional engineer certification. Each hazardous waste storage tank and secondary containment system must be certified by a professional engineer. Is there any engineers in here? No? Well, the Board of Professional Engineers, there's several engineer disciplines. Nuclear engineer, safety engineer, traffic engineer. Can any engineer that's certified by the board do these types of certifications? There's nothing in regulation that says it. I've talked to the Board of Engineers. They didn't want to say, and exclude anyone from it. They said, well, you guys wrote the regs, you guys deal with it. So this was an issue several years ago, and it mainly, even though it dealt with hazardous waste storage, it really affected our treatment facilities because the requirement is similar. So we got together and decided to be consistent. We involved the private sector also, and we said if you have either a civil, structural, or geotechnical professional engineer do the certification, you're good to go. So any of those 3 disciplines are A-OK. I have mechanical engineers that want to do it, and if you read that section that was printed earlier, actually right in here, 66265.192, there's a whole list of things that the engineer looks for. And some of that, the mechanical is probably qualified to do. But if they're going to do certain portions, the overall packet has to be signed off by a civil, structural, or geotechnical, just FYI. I can talk for hours on this, but we don't want to miss lunch. I put in here that the reports expire every 5 years. That's really also not totally true. It's just that there's no length of time in regulation, but what we found that is most engineers will only certify up to 5 years. So whatever they put in there, if they put 1 year, 2 years, but mostly it's 5 years, then a new certification must occur. Biennial reporting. This is for your RCRA large quantity generators. This is an EPA requirement. If you ship hazardous waste to a TSDF within the United States, you have to fill out a report summarizing your activities by March 1st of each even number year and covers generator activity for the previous year. Copy of the report must be sent to DTSC, and they have to keep copies on site for how long? 3 years, okay? Source reduction. That's another class in and of itself. Source reduction, also known as SB 14, if you're subject to it, most LQGs are, they are required to comply with 3 elements, paper elements in SB 14. It's required every 4 years For example, of reporting year 2014, the following documents must be prepared by September 1st of 2015. You have what's known as a plan, source reduction evaluation plan. You have a performance report and the SPR, the summary progress report. These used to be sent in to DTSC. DTSC had a whole SB14 wing. That's been changed a little bit, and these documents are no longer required to be sent up to DTSC. However, they are to be maintained on site, and it's currently an issue with our technical advisory group insofar as what's now our responsibility as a CUPA inspector. Just a moment. Because this stuff would be scrutinized thoroughly at the state level, and I just don't know where our responsibility lies now in the review of this stuff. Yes, sir?
Is there an online reporting system similar to CERTS for submitting SB14?
There's no longer requirement. There's no requirement that they submit it anymore. So I don't know if there's an on. No, this is the SB14.
Right, but previous to that, you mentioned biennial report. Is there an online reporting system?
He says yes. I'm not aware.
Yeah, you get into easy track and you
Yeah, that's what it is. I saw it recently. I was never familiar with it, so I was wondering.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was. We're all trying to go paperless these days, so
and
yeah.
it's due March 1st, I think.
Yes.
It's online,
Yes.
can't see it, just type it there, you have to print it out.
There you go. I've worked for the county for 28 years, and it's amazing how much I still learn each and every day. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Training. This is one of the biggies for LQGs, whether you're a RCRA or a state only, is training. Formal training programs required. The other CESQG and SQGs, you still got to train your employees, but it's not quite as detailed and formal as it is with LQGs. So again, Jiffy Lubes, I don't mean to say them specifically, but those types of automotive maintenance facilities that generate lots of used oil, they're going to be required to comply with these training requirements, okay? Classroom instruction or on-the-job training that teaches them to do what they do, right? And this has, by the way, this training is required not just by people that do the oil changes or that deal with the labeling of the drums. Some level of training is required for every single employee at that facility. That includes front office personnel. That includes salesmen. Everyone, to some level, has to have training. Obviously, those that deal directly with the hazardous waste are having a much higher training threshold, but everyone has to have some level of training. Training must be directed by a person who has been trained in hazardous waste management themselves. They got to know what they're talking about. A lot of the large facilities hire companies to come in and do this training. But they can do it themselves, but they must know what they're talking about. So they're going to be talking about hazardous waste management, including contingency plan implementation. It's designed for personnel to effectively respond if they have a problem. You know, they get a spill, what are they going to do? Some facilities you run, because it's just too nasty. Or other facilities, hey, where's the spill kit located? They got to be trained up on that stuff. For front office folks, the training may be, we got an alarm going off, what are you going to do? Call 911. It could be that simple, but it has to be, they have to be trained up on that. The frequencies in red, new employees, 6 months after employment, within 6 months of employment, and every year thereafter. And I've been told that what annually means is an anniversary date. So if I did my haz waste management training on June 1st, 2014, I can't do it September of 2015. So it's not within a calendar, it's by anniversary date. So that's what annually refers to. So we've done the training, right? All generators need some level of training. LQGs need specific training, more training, but LQGs also have to document their training. And this is the big one for those like lube facilities. They may be training, but they may not always be documenting it. And this is where Fed EPA really was a stickler at my 2 facilities. They were able to pull this together, but they weren't keeping it all in one spot. It took a little time to find it. Some of it was in HR, some of it was over here. So I would advise when you're doing an LQG inspection and you're asking for training records that they keep it all in one binder for you. The job title for each position related to the hazardous waste management and the name of the employee filling each job. So job title, the person, and a written job description. See how HR can get involved in this stuff? A lot of this stuff might, if they don't have it, if your contact doesn't know where it's at, ask about HR. So they need the person's name, their job title, and a written job description. They need a written description of the type and amount of both introductory and continuing training that will be given to each person. And usually that's what I see when they do their annual training. They might do manifesting one year. The next year they might do container labeling or weekly inspections, what to look for, things like that. It doesn't have to be this grandiose all-day thing, although some businesses do that. Of course, you need a record of the attendance with the dates and signatures of each employee. Yeah, that's a requirement, a signature of the employee. And of course, the records need to be kept until closure of the site, right? Isn't that? Training records on current personnel must be kept until closure of the site. Training records on former employees must be kept for at least 3 years. Wow. That's a lot of requirements that your corner lube facility didn't know about. Yes? So in this world of paperless, I'll get specific to what you said, but these records can be made available on the company's computer. It doesn't have to be in hard copy form. So if they're able to bring it up on a file, electronic file, and you're able to scroll through and get it all, you're good to go. But she was specifically saying an actual signature. I know sometimes we send our inspection reports via email, and we're not getting a signature, but we're getting a read receipt, right? And so far, our legal is okay with that as being acknowledgement of being received. So if you have some way of getting an electronic signature, whether it be...
Well, I mean, each employee is linked to a training.
Okay. So they're doing online training.
It's online training.
So if you have a way to track that person has a unique email, so to speak?
An employee ID.
Employee ID, there you go.
It tracks them from their title, the date they began, and when they completed.
It sounds like that would be sufficient. Thank you for asking that question. Okay, emergency planning requirements. Again, talking about large quantity generators. They're required to prepare a contingency plan, 2 levels of reporting, which are dependent on total amount of hazardous waste generated. So your LQGs complete a full contingency plan. If they, well, this is just for everything. If you're not an LQG, you may opt to follow RCRA-oriented contingency plan requirements for small quantity generators. It's a lot of stuff, but again, as a guide. So for LQGs, your contingency plan is going to be a written plan. Of course, it could be electronic, but it has to be, well, I'll get into availability. It's designed to minimize hazards to your employees and the environment. Briefly in the back. the contingency plan. You're episodic? Meaning, I didn't understand the question. You generate over only one time during the year? So that's an episodic LQG. The private companies that talk for a week in LQGs address episodic generation. There's guidance on that. Technically, for that month, you had to meet all these requirements. So my experience with episodic LQGs is they just do it. They just call themselves LQGs and deal with it. But thank you. There is that area out there of episodic LQG generation. So where are we on this? So the plans to help in emergency situations, and hazardous waste generators are responsible to plan for emergencies at their business and are required to have a contingency plan. The contingency plan has to be kept up to date, and oftentimes when you're reviewing this plan, you'll see emergency contact personnel that haven't been employed there for 5 years. So violation. We can talk about that later. So this is these are some of the elements that need to be in your plan. Of course, the business name, address, phone, fax, email. A brief description of actions. What are they going to do in an emergency? We're going to run. Or they're going to burn. They have a spill kit. Things that the employees must take to minimize the hazards. They have to have some type of communication equipment. Internal alarm, loudspeaker. The building's only this size. We yell, "Get out!" So they don't have to have an alarm system, but they have to have some means of communication. They have to list what that's going to be. Okay? Some of them have those little internal radios. Again, name, address, telephone numbers of an employee qualified to act as the emergency coordinator. That's the one that you got to ensure is up to date and current, because that is a required element. This is, I don't know if you really see this. I just put this as an example of a CUPA form out of CSRS for their Consolidated Emergency Response Contingency Plan. So they have alternate emergency coordinators also, they list. They need a list of emergency equipment and where it's going to be located. Okay, usually that's on a site map. This form, by the way, on the bottom is a link off of Cal EPA where you can get that form. How are we doing on time? Okay, shift, you gonna use that?
Okay, we're gonna power through the rest of it so that we can get you to lunch on time. This is kind of the last major section. It kind of closes the whole thing about what we've been talking about, what type of businesses that have been generating what kind of waste, the checklist of things that as inspectors you have to look for. And now it comes down to, okay, you see something that's questionable, incorrect, or you as a business client that you're going through your daily, weekly inspections, and that you might notice some things that are just not right, or you're trying to encourage your employees to do the right thing to comply with the regulations. Okay, regulatory compliance is a major issue, and that it really is two sides. And I think I've kind of expressed to you, I feel that there's a balance. There's a balancing scale between what businesses have to do to survive and to do right with the environmental compliance rules, and what inspectors are expected to observe and document. And so here are the common violations that we see. I know, that's me. This is before I had 3 kids and a Harley. Okay, so again, hazardous waste labeling. Okay, it's really common. It's very easy to do. I will admit that as a business client, it's not always easy to maintain because of the sun. It's fading, and employees not doing the right thing. Maybe perhaps you're relying on your contractor to put those labels on. Once again, I have to remind you, it is the generator's responsibility from cradle to grave for that waste, and that includes labeling. Accumulation time, again, that is an issue because that really tells the inspector and tells you what kind of generator are you. Are you a CSQG? Are you a SQG or LQG? That really kind of defines how the inspection is going to go. Okay, open container. Manifests not having records for 3 years, generator not storing within accumulation time, not having an EPID number, and having this not closed. Now, there are, I wouldn't say gray area. I think from a regulatory standpoint, it's not a gray area, but I know from a business standpoint, especially small mom and pop shops, you know, you got a little funnel and you want to dump this waste and you got oil change working all day long, people coming in and out. New inspectors, I'm going to talk to you specifically. You need to ask those questions. You need to be observing. You need to see what kind of flow they have, because it is a little bit of give on when it's being used. But earlier I mentioned if I inspect the plating shop, the super sack, the nylon square bag that has filter cake and all this waste in there, and it's already full, it needs to be closed. It's no longer in use. That's you right there. Facilities not having their contingency plan. That's another violation, not having that documented. Sometimes it's not filled out. I have actually seen that document that Terry pointed out earlier that's downloaded from the CUPA website, and it's completely blank. And the facility managers say, I have my plan, it's right here. See, it has phone numbers to Cal OES and all that. No, it needs to be filled out. And then this is where problems seriously arises, is when as business clients, as generators, they're not determining all the waste. There's a really, I would say there's just 3 answers, right? Yes, I've done a determination. No, I haven't done the determination. Or I don't know. Now, I don't know is not an acceptable answer. And obviously, if you haven't done a waste determination, and it is a waste, that is a violation. Manifests not properly completed by a generator and copies not sent to DTSC. That can sometimes be an office admin issue. You know, your accounting department is different from your facility maintenance, where the records are being kept and started, and it may not have made the full loop. Inspectors, we need to actually ask those questions. Maybe we need to talk to the accounting department, or maybe the HR person that has those records. You need to ask those questions to make sure that the entire document is making it back to the original receipt. And then the obvious, when things are spilled, not maintained, leaking out of drums, how is that being handled? How is that being contained? Or maybe it's not being contained. This violation, in certain circumstances, that's when we're talking about the felonies. So please be careful of looking for this. Spillage does happen. It does. There was a mentor of mine that he's retired now, but back 17 years ago, he told me, and he was an old military guy, he said, "Son, everybody dumps. Everybody dumps. It's just a matter of whether or not it's legal or illegal. You dump your stuff in your trash in your kitchen, that's dumping. But it's legal. You can dump your food and dump whatever. You go to the restroom, you're discharging something, but it's legal." So when you're discharging something that is a hazardous waste and it's not being properly managed, that is illegal. So I talk about enforcement a lot because it's kind of like my forte. I went to law school and I love the law and stuff like that, and kind of geeky like that, so I love talking about it. But I don't really talk about it from, I want to get our business clients. That's not what I mean. I think the law allows for some fair play, and also it gives notice, and it also sets a standard both for the regulatory community as well as the business client community. So we have inspections. We do inspections. During the inspections, there are maybe observations of items that turns into a violation. In the Title 22 world, there are minors, Class 2, Class 1. If you have a Class 1 violation, and we'll get into briefly what that means, CUPA inspectors and PA inspectors, you are required by our regulation to do formal enforcement. Notice a violation, and formal enforcement, it might be some sort of an administrative hearing, an AEO, maybe some of you have heard of that. It might be a civil fines or criminal fines by the local jurisdiction that regulates hazardous waste. Inspections, routine inspections for CUPA inspectors. You're expected, your CUPA or your PA is expected to do at least one routine inspection at that facility every three years. Usually is unannounced. Okay, and it's kind of vague. There's no real set rule that it has to be scheduled or it has to be unannounced, but we prefer to do it unannounced so that we can kind of see the day-to-day operations. Sometimes it's not possible. I've gone to major businesses in Orange County area where they have military contracts, and you have to schedule it. And consent. Among the new inspectors who have gone, or actually in general, who have gone to the EPA Basic Inspector Academy, it's a week-long class. Okay. I see the majority of the regulators haven't gone. I highly encourage you to go to that class and sign up for it. It's a week-long class. One of the major topics is to get into a facility to ask for consent. If you forget everything else in the last 3 hours that we've been talking, I want you to write this down. Come on, everybody, pick up your pen and pad. Health and Safety Code 25185. That is the section right before it talks about felonies. It talks about the right to entry. Now, for those of you that are, I'm going to speak to the CUPA inspectors. If someone had taught you somewhere along the lines, like I did many moons ago, you can just walk in. You have the right. You know, they have a permit with us. They pay fees, and so that gives you the right to go in and inspect. Because even the law says at reasonable hours of the day, right? That's what it says on that section. If you Google it, that's what it says. But many of my trainers in the past, and maybe some of your trainers, forget the word may right before that. Okay, it says a local official designated to do inspections, hazardous waste under this title, whatever, may at a reasonable hour. And then it lists out the right to inspect and all of that, okay? So we do have to ask for consent. And for those of you that have been gone through a CUPA audit, DTSC, Cal EPA, they taught a class last year about consent. Extremely important because, like I've said, hazardous waste laws is one of the few environmental laws that can become criminal. You're potentially taking away someone's Fourth Amendment rights. Absolutely, you have to ask consent and document it. I'll get to that. Business clients. In that last year's EPA workshop done by an EPA attorney, he said specifically, there's no partial consent, okay? Right to inspect, right to enter, right to take photographs, right to look at documents. If you consent to that, you're consenting to the whole list of items. And I know, and I have been in places where they have military contracts and they absolutely says, you cannot take photos because it's in my contract. And I have to kindly explain to them, I'm not looking at your process. I'm not taking pictures of your processes. I'm taking pictures of violations of the waste. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, I have to clearly explain to them that if you're going to consent, you're consenting to everything under the Health and Safety Code. So at the end of the day, no, I don't consent. Go away. Then there's a whole workshop of inspection warrants, search warrants, and I won't get into that because that is a huge topic. And as inspectors, if you can't get into one place and maybe the fire department can't get into the same place, maybe your public works guy who can't get in, or maybe the sanitation district or the air board can't get in, you guys obviously have to talk to each other. Something is going on. It can't just be because I have a military contract. That doesn't work. So it's a huge topic, but this is what I teach the new trainees, that consent is absolutely needed. That consent might be voluntary consent, like what we talked about, and if it's refused, it turns into a court-ordered, like an inspection warrant, like a search warrant. Thorough tour of the process area, storage area, perimeters. Don't forget to look for the trash. That's something that we forget because, you know, especially in a large facility and you're walking through an hour and a half of inspection with, you know, so-and-so, and you're looking at your watch like, I gotta get to lunch. you forget to do that. But that's where the violations are at. Okay, that's where the trash problem is a problem. So you must get to that. And do not be dissuaded by time or maybe perhaps the personality. You have to do that. As facility business clients, it's expected that you hold your employees responsible, because that trash is that safety net between going through an enforcement order or simply a violation of some sort that is less than civil or criminal. And then, of course, documentation review and report writing. Okay, violations, minor violations. No injuries or significant threat to people or the environment. Not willful. Huge justification. No economic benefit. Example of which could be missing labels, drums not closed, incomplete, not saying no manifest, but incomplete manifest. Maybe your contingency plan, you know, that facility manager shows me a blank contingency plan, says, I have one. Please fill it out. And usually we just ask for return to compliance. It's a form that they fill out. They might send us photos of their labeling, or they might send us, you know, a copy of it to document it. Okay, class 2 is recalcitrant. You go back year after year, 1 year, second year, or maybe perhaps you're going back multiple times for re-inspections. First time is, hey, you know, I was looking for that contingency plan. You printed it out. Great, appreciate it. Please fill it out. If you can't send it in, call me. We can reschedule, and I can physically take a look at it. I go back out there, and it's still not done. Okay, that minor now becomes a class 2. Violations must be corrected immediately, examples of which maybe your secondary containment's not cleaned, documentation not maintained, inadequate training records. Something that maybe perhaps one of the ladies mentioned about online training. You know, you can't really send it to me because it's on the computer and I have to physically get out there and take a look. Okay, this is the big one. Significant threat to public or the environment. There's a whole slew of factors. Okay, in general, volume plays a role, how hazardous it is, proximity to the public. This is all legal language out of the Health and Safety Code. Willful, intentional, negligent, knowing, or should have known. I can tell you, in my past experience of doing enforcement, our DA loves knowing or should have known. How does that happen? I've written a violation. That's a notice to our business clients. We've had multiple conversations. Even to some point, I'm offering up literally, here's the answers. Here's the contingency plan that I printed out of my office. Please fill it out. I've told you many times you cannot have spills and not clean it up. And it's going into the, I'm receiving a complaint from your neighbors. That includes illegal disposal, storage beyond accumulation time, failure to obtain a P assessment, failure to use a registered transporter. All of those things are very, very much preventable, very much. Notice of violations. It's a step, and I used to work for a CUPA that only issued notice of violation as their highest level, and this is prior to DTSC, you know, setting all the CUPAs straight and say you need to do formal enforcement, and it's before the times of AEOs were set in place. And we felt that, oh, notice of violation, that's pretty official, that's good. But I'm telling you right now that in today's standard, where you have administrative orders, enforcement orders, and you have the ability to send cases to district attorney's office for filing, notice of violation is just a notice of violation. It is a little bit more official than an inspection report, but notice it's really meant for class 2 and minor violations. If you have a class 1, meaning the stuff is on the ground, not cleaned up, out into the environment, that is class 1. Writing a notice of violation is not, it's technically not correct under DTSC's rules on enforcement, it's not considered formal. Copy is sent to the district attorney's office, and non-compliant with all violations obtained, and the NOV results in formal enforcement. So there is a formal enforcement that you have to go through if it's a class 1, or class 2s and minors are not corrected. Okay. How many of you CUPAs and PAs have a AEO process? Okay, that's not a lot. Oh my goodness, there's administrative order 2 hours, that was on Monday. AEO 101 2 hours, that was Tuesday, and enforcement 101 2 hours on Tuesday as well. So we're just going to briefly touch on it. If you guys gone to those classes, this is just a brief overview review. AEO, you have to do a request for show cause. It's a form that you have to fill out. You have to, in our jurisdiction, we simply take the inspection reports, we list them out, we list out the violations that are outstanding, and we'll definitely include the copy of the inspection report. Any notice of violations, we would include it on also historical enforcement documents, emails, conversations that you've had where you're asking, hey, when can I come back? You know, I know you denied me, you know, you said you were really busy on Monday, when can we come back? You know, multiple times you're denying me entry, or there's a violation of, hey, where's the test results? Looking for that waste determination results about that dust that we found on the floor that was outside your facility. Any complaints that we've generated? Oh, your neighbors were complaining about the spillage or mishandling of waste. Of course, pictures, and if we actually had to take samples, we've gone out there, taken samples, we have made some determination of what it is. We submit those as part of the package. $10.52, we're good. So that's what we got. So you have time to ask questions. Terry and I will try our best to accommodate and answer your questions as best of our abilities.
I just want to clarify back on satellite accumulation. I got kind of hung up. So satellite accumulation allows you to store up to 55 gallons for a maximum of a year. That was not on the slide. So if I'm employing satellite accumulation on this drum over here, and I never reach 55 gallons, right? I still can't hold on to it more than a year, all right? And if I reach 55 gallons in month 11, and I put that second date on it, and I'm a LQG, I get 90 days, right? No. I'm in month 11. I only have 30 more days before that drum has to be offsite. I just wanted to clarify that. Questions? Yes, sir.
Satellite accumulation. In the case of satellite accumulation, can the drum be used by more than one operator, or does it have to be one drum per operator?
No, it can be used by multiple operators.